those who forget history are doomed to become Americans. Satellite photos released Sunday reveal convoys of trucks outside the bombed-out Iranian nuclear facilities, suggesting much of the nuclear material had already been removed before Trump's bombing campaign began. So now it seems Iran still has uranium that's been enriched up to 60%. They lack most of the centrifuges, which they can get from China or Russia now. And because of the attacks, we have no idea where their uranium is being hidden, so we can't check to see how purified it's becoming. Early in June, before the Israeli airstrikes began, UN weapons inspectors warned that while Iran was allowing inspectors in each day, they had become somewhat non-compliant. And the UN inspectors warned that Iran was weeks away from being able to build a nuclear bomb if it wanted to. This is the difference between Iraq, our illegal invasion of Iraq, and our illegal bombing of Iran. Trump and Cheney lied and said Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Trump is saying they don't have weapons of mass destruction. We're not sure if they're ever going to have weapons of mass destruction. But Melania won't sleep with me, and I smell like a fart, so I need to bomb something. That's basically what it is. We have an impotent commander-in-chief who smells like a fart. So that was what we believed, that Iran was something 2 weeks away from getting a nuclear bomb if it wanted one. By the way, that ran counter to what Tulsi Gabbard, our director of national intelligence, was claiming. She told the president the entire U.S. intelligence community, made up of nearly 18 separate spy agencies, they all agreed that Iran was 3 years away from being able to produce a bomb. And that was before the Israeli airstrikes began. She also repeated what the United States intelligence community has been saying for more than a decade, and that is Iran ended its nuclear bomb program more than 20 years ago. But right before Trump launched his airstrikes on Saturday, Tulsi Gabbard announced she had changed her mind and said Iran was only weeks away from being able to produce a nuclear bomb. John Ratcliffe, our CIA director, in the Situation Room, telling Trump as recently as Friday night, if you attack Iran, you're not going to take out their nuclear capabilities. You're going to create resolve so that they pivot and decide to become a nuclear power so they can enjoy the same protections North Korea has. And he said, our evidence shows, despite what the UN is saying, our evidence says they abandoned their nuclear bomb program 20 years ago. So why the campaign? Why the bombing campaign? To check out the bunker busters to see if they work. Impotent men who smell like farts, who want to take it out on women who won't sleep with them, so they need to see a missile-shaped object, some phallic symbol, explode, because theirs doesn't. And if you think I'm being glib, I'm not. This is what it's about. Sexual frustration. And Trump wanted to put numbers on the board, trying to look successful because he's a failure. So he has to piggyback onto Benjamin Netanyahu's. He loves the way Netanyahu talks and threatens. So I want to do some of that. What's the end result? Well, like I said, if we're lucky, we'll get back to the 2015 treaty that President Obama signed with the Iranians, if we're lucky. They're threatening retaliatory strikes. Putin plays chess and stayed out of this. Now, I don't know. He stayed out of it, but now there's talk he's ready to give them something in the way of nuclear technology. You know how we take credit for tricking the Russians into invading Afghanistan in the late 70s? Zbigniew Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, used to brag, I tricked the Russians into invading Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires, and because of that, the Soviet Union fell. That's what Zbigniew Brzezinski said. I tricked the Soviet Union into invading Afghanistan. That's why they fell. You'll notice throughout the lead-up, Putin, totally silent. I'll mediate. We can't do anything. Last week, Putin was saying, we offered air defenses to Iran. They turned it down. We can't do anything other than play chess and think 14 moves ahead. What happens now if Russia decides to make Iran a nuclear power? I don't think that's going to happen. But there's talk of that. White House officials calling Saturday's strikes a one-off. It always is. We're just going to drop these bombs, and then we're going to move on with our life. Right? Never leads to more chaos. Iran's parliament voted to close the Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil passes. Closing the Strait of Hormuz is not a final decision made by the parliament. The final decision must be approved by Iran's supreme leader. With 2 U.S. aircraft carriers in that region and a third U.S. aircraft carrier on its way, if Iran attempts to choke off the Strait of Hormuz, considering what that would do to world oil prices, it's doubtful the United States wouldn't then engage with Iranian naval vessels attempting to mine this very strategic sea lane. During the height of Iran's war with Iraq back in 1988, Iran placed nearly 300 mines in the Strait of Hormuz, one of which nearly sank a U.S. warship. It got hit by one. So before the U.S. airstrikes, there appeared to be a split inside the Republican Party, with some MAGA isolationists accusing Donald Trump of reneging on his America First promises to keep America out of foreign wars so we could focus on our real enemies, other Americans. That's MAGA wants to fight an internal war. J.D. Vance, our vice president, is an America Firster. He opposed the air attacks on Yemen back in March, but he went along with them because he's actually more of a J.D. Vance Firster than he is an America Firster. On Sunday, after the attacks, J.D. Vance assured MAGA Republicans the attack on Iran wouldn't result in another long, drawn-out war in the Middle East. Speaking of George W. Bush's failed invasion of Iraq, Vance said, quote, I understand your concern. Back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives. Apparently it's doing whatever Bibi Netanyahu says. Freshman Republican Senator from Montana, Senator Tim Sheehy, said he opposed Trump bombing Fordo, warning that it wouldn't end Iran's nuclear bomb ambitions. But then after the airstrikes, he called it the right decision. Sheehy is a veteran from Iraq. He fought in Iraq, but he doesn't know if he got shot in Iraq or if he got shot when he dropped his gun on a camping trip in Montana. Hasn't quite figured that one out. Charlie Kirk, who runs Turning Points and is a prodigious MAGA Republican fundraiser, also warned against the airstrikes. But now, after Trump went ahead with them, Charlie Kirk calling it the right decision. So as expected, pushback inside the Republican Party is pretty muted. Ohio House Republican Warren Davidson, however, saying, quote, it's hard to conceive a rationale that's constitutional. Yeah, it's not constitutional, and it's a violation of the War Powers Act. Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky, said this is not constitutional. Republican Massie co-sponsored a resolution last week along with Democrat Ro Khanna to block military action in Iran without Congress first authorizing it. Republican Thomas Massie stated, after the strikes, he said there was no imminent threat to the United States. He said, even worse, Congress was on vacation when all this was happening. The House was on vacation. So what you had last week was, I'm going to repeat what I said at the top of the show, because Democrats, at least the Democratic leadership, Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, last week could have endorsed the two War Powers resolutions, the one from Tim Kaine, Democrat, in the Senate, and the one in the House that Republican Tom Massie and Democrat Ro Khanna introduced to block Donald Trump from dropping bombs on Iran. Hakeem Jeffries, House Minority Leader, Senator Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, killed those bills, never brought them up for a vote, never talked about them. Now, ex post facto, they're going, this was in violation of the War Powers. You were in violation of the War Powers Act. It's your job to introduce legislation to block a president from dropping bombs before he does it. That's how the War Powers Act works. And the Democrats wonder, going into the midterms, why congressional Republicans have an 11% higher approval rating than congressional Democrats. But we're supposed to take back the Senate and the House of Representatives next year. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said Trump owes the American people an explanation, and then calls for the War Powers Act to be invoked. Little late, Chucky. Where am I? Oh, Bernie. I'm all at it. Bernie Sanders calling Trump's attacks, quote, grossly unconstitutional. He added, only Congress has the authority to take the country to war. Bernie was saying it all last week. Of course, nobody listened to him. Where am I? Senate Democrat from Rhode Island, Jack Reed, the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, accusing Trump of gambling with America's security. Senator Reed, one of the few Democrats to openly oppose Israel's bombing of Iran last week, said of Trump's airstrikes, quote, it's easier to start wars than end them. That should be chiseled into the forehead of every United States member of Congress. It's easier to start wars than end them. It should be, instead of e pluribus unum or in God we trust, that's what it should say on our currency. And again, Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, who already introduced a War Powers resolution last week to rein in Trump's authority to launch an airstrike in Iran, he called Trump's decision Saturday horrible judgment. Kaine said American people are overwhelmingly opposed to the U.S. waging war on Iran, unquote. Tim Kaine called the strike unconstitutional and an offensive war of choice by a president without consultation of Congress. So, I got to wrap it up. Trump is obviously the bad guy. But once again, Democrats create conditions for authoritarian fascists like Donald Trump to thrive. You had Tim Kaine last week, Democrat from Virginia, Hillary's running mate in 2016. You had Ro Khanna, California Democrat, in the House. You had Kentucky Republican Thomas Massie invoking the War Powers Resolution, which was passed in the aftermath of Vietnam to avoid another Vietnam. And one of the provisions of the War Powers Act is you can stop a president from bombing another country before he does it. Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries had these bills that they could have brought before Congress. Yes, there's no question that John Thune, Majority Leader, and Mike Johnson, House the Speaker, would have rejected it. But then you go on record being against the airstrikes, and you put the Republicans, you make them own those airstrikes. I hate beating up on the Democrats. I really do. Because Trump is horrible. But the fecklessness of the ruling class, multimillionaires controlling the Democratic Party, has to end. Bernie said we need to clean house last week, that we have to start getting rid of people in the Democratic Party who answer to billionaires. I say go one step further, get rid of the millionaires. If you're a millionaire or a billionaire, you can vote for Democrats, but you're not allowed inside the leadership. There needs to be a dialectic. One party has to represent the 1%, and another party has to represent the 99%. Otherwise, we're going to be, where we're going to be. Thank you for listening to me